Take your Bible and turn to Revelation chapter 17. And the lesson today will be Revelation chapter 17 and 18. Now, the visitors, I'm going to try to help you with this as I will everyone else, but I've been trying to preach through the book of Revelation. I haven't been doing it every Sunday, but about once a month. And let me tell you, that is a challenge, turning this book into sermons. And particularly, I've been challenged by these two chapters on exactly what to do with this. I don't feel comfortable as a preacher standing up and preaching about something when I don't know what it's talking about. And so here we are. And much of the book of Revelation is that way. And particularly these two chapters, there's a main part of this in these two chapters that it would seem like you ought to know what this is talking about. And yet it's not given what that is. And so if it's not given, I'm thinking, well, the spiritual lessons are where I want to concentrate. Even though we don't know one of the core pieces that this is discussing here, as we'll get into it, I think we'll be able to appreciate the spiritual lessons that are involved. And that's what I've focused on throughout this book. Now let me give you a little bit of overview of the book. I've been hesitant to bring this lesson. In fact, it's been a while since I've really preached from Revelation. And because I've been hesitant to bring this lesson. One, because it's just a difficult section to begin with. But second, I'm going to show you one of the most repulsive scenes in all of the Bible. And I really don't like the picture that is given here in this book. And as I read it, you will see, this is one of the most disgusting and repulsive images that you're going to find in the Bible. I want you to understand that in this latter part of the book of Revelation, what is taking place here, the enemies of the Lord's church are being shown to us. Begins with a great red dragon. Remember that dragon? And then after the great dragon, there's the second enemy, which is really two parts here. There's the beast that comes out of the sea. And then there's the beast that comes out of the land. And the beast that comes out of the land looks like a lamb. And it's a false prophet. So the beast and the false prophet are what these two beasts are called. And then this image. And this is the great whore that sits on the scarlet beast. And this is where things get just about as disgusting and repulsive as they can be in this book. But now this is where things begin to turn. And one by one, as these three beasts arise in the book, you're going to see these three beasts are destroyed. And the Lord's church is going to triumph over all of these things. And so that's the general pattern now of what we're talking about. Babylon the Great is fallen. Now we knew this was coming. It's been part of the book. It's been warning us about Babylon coming, but when it does, it says now, but Babylon is fallen. Babylon will fall. It tells us in Revelation 14 in verse 8, there followed another angel saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. And then it says in Revelation 19 through 20, and the great city was divided in three parts, and the cities of the nations fell, and great Babylon came in remembrance before God, to give unto her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. And every island fled away, and the mountains were not found. So we knew whatever this Babylon is coming, but it's fallen, and it's good for the churches to see in Asia. But remember now, see, the book of Revelation is written to the 7 churches in Asia. Don't read the book of Revelation to try to figure out who's going to be president or what's going to happen in Iran or Iraq. That's not what the book of Revelation is about. It was written to the 7 churches of Asia for things which to them would shortly come to pass, and to let them know what this was, and they would have received the interpretation by those messengers that took the book to them. Now we have the book they received. We don't have the interpretation they received. But we know that they could look at this and it would be explained, and then they would see how that all would come out well for them. And for us now, since we're so deprived of the interpretation itself, we can only guess about what some of those interpretations are, and we need to focus in on what spiritual lessons can we draw out of this book. So to kind of give a little review there as we get into this. Now, why is Babylon called Babylon the Great? I'm going to read these 2 chapters, 17 and 18. And as I do, I want you to look for this. What makes Babylon the Great? Well, you're going to see that Babylon is great in material things and worldly success. It says that she's arrayed in purple and scarlet, decked with gold and precious stones and pearls. In her hand she holds a golden cup. She's glorified herself and lives deliciously. That's the word that is there. And she sat as a queen. And she's pretty confident. I shall see no more sorrow. So you might think, well, from a worldly sense, that sounds very great. But look at the rest of this. Babylon the Great is great in her spiritual wickedness. And this is where the scene gets very repulsive. She is called the great whore. The kings of the earth were drunk with the wine of her fornications. Her cup is filled with abominations and filthiness. She is drunken with the blood of the saints. And she makes war against the Lamb. Her sins reach into heaven, and by her sorceries the nations are deceived. There's one other reason Babylon the Great is great, and that is you're going to see she is great in her downfall. It says she sits on a beast, but now that beast is going to turn on her and make her desolate and naked and eat her flesh. And he devours her with fire. The plagues all come on her in one day. She's filled with death and mourning and famine. And the merchants and the ships that have grown rich by her are going to see her burning, and they're going to stay afar off. And they're going to say, weep and mourn and say, alas, the great city. The holy apostles and prophets are going to rejoice in her fall. We'll get into that into another lesson. But then it says she will sink like a great millstone cast into the sea. Well, what are we talking about? I mean, you see, what is John talking about? Well, Babylon is a city. And you have to remember now, back in those times, cities ruled. You talk more about cities ruling than you would in countries ruling. And so like Rome, the city that ruled all over the Mediterranean, see, it was the rule of a city. And so this is a great seat of power. This Babylon is a city that is a great seat of power. There was a city named Babylon. And we read about this city in the Old Testament. And there was a time in which Babylon was the great city that ruled the world. Nebuchadnezzar was its king. And this great city came up against Jerusalem and destroyed Jerusalem and the temple and carried the people away captive. And they were in captivity for 70 years. And by the rivers of Babylon they wept when they remembered Zion. And then later they were able to return. So in the New Testament, when it's talking in language that is like this, and it's talking about a great ruling city oppressing God's people, and say, well, that's Babylon, you see, a great foreign oppressive city. But this wasn't the Babylon of the Old Testament. That was a city that had long ago fallen into far away from what it was, and there was a location there, but it was nothing like the city of the Old Testament. Is Babylon Jerusalem? Well, a few years ago, I probably would have been more confident to tell you what city Babylon was than I am now. I keep studying Revelation, and you know, some things, the more you study, the more confident you become. And I think Revelation may be a book that the more you study, the more cautious you become. There's a whole field of thought that says, well, now this Babylon is Jerusalem that has fallen. And there's things that you read about this Babylon that make it sound like Jerusalem. Revelation 10 and verse 16. The 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. Well, that sounds like Rome turning on Jerusalem. And that's what happens in AD 70. And so some have thought, well, this is Rome turning on Jerusalem here in this. Another, Revelation 18 in verse 4. I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. Well, when Jerusalem was besieged by Rome, the Lord had already warned the Christians, now, when you see the armies approaching, you get out of the city. Come out from among her, and don't be there with her. And so that makes it sound like this could be Jerusalem. But then this last thing it says in Revelation 18:24, and in her was found the blood of the prophets and of the saints and all that were slain upon the earth. Well, we know that Jerusalem was famous for shedding the blood of the prophets and of the apostles and of the saints. So that makes it sound like Jerusalem. Someone said, no, not Jerusalem. It doesn't fit. And they said, this great city, this great Babylon, it's Rome. Well, is Babylon Rome here in the book of Revelation? And there's things you read about this city that makes it sound like this could be Rome. Revelation 17 in verse 18. The woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. Well, that sounds like Rome in the New Testament, doesn't it? And then the way Rome was a city, the reason Rome became great, because it was all the trade and commerce that took place in and out of that city, and it describes that here. The merchandise of gold and silver and precious stones and pearls and fine linen and purple and silk and scarlet and thiamine wood, and all manner of vessels of ivory, and all manner of vessels of most precious wood, and of brass, of iron, and marble, and cinnamon, and odors, and ointments, and frankincense, and wine, and oil, and fine flour, and wheat, and beasts, and sheep, and horses, and chariots, and slaves, and souls of men. Well, now that sounds like a Roman economy when you read about that. And it really depends on when you think Revelation was written. Because some believe that the book of Revelation is written before the destruction of Jerusalem, and therefore it's talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. And others say, oh, no. The book of Revelation is written after the destruction of Jerusalem. It's talking about the downfall of Rome. And you can study and study and study that, and there's very good arguments for both of those positions. And that makes this book very difficult. I believe the spiritual lessons are independent of that. And, you know, I want to teach the Bible. I could get up here and go over a lot of history and draw a lot of connections, and you can get deeper and deeper and deeper into this study and get further and further and further away from really what it is the Bible is teaching, and spend all our times on history lessons, and I don't want to do that. I have some opinions about all of this, but I'm hesitant there as well, because I don't want to stand up here and preach my opinions. And so you see the dilemma in trying to do justice here to this book. Let's focus on the spiritual lesson. Even though this main key thing that we might think is so important to understand is going to escape us, and be able to really nail that down and what that is. But now that you've got a picture of what we're going here, I want to read to you the vision. Now remember, this is vision and this is symbolic here, so don't take all this literal. But let me just read you those 2 chapters. As we read this, I'll go ahead and mention this. It's going to talk about 7 kings. And the 8th king that was of the 7th, and of the 10 kings that are yet to come. And people will read that and say, aha! That's how we can figure out the dating of the book of Revelation. Those 7 kings are the 7 Caesars. And so let's just start counting. Well, where do we find 6 and 7 Caesars? And they'll start counting, but let me tell you what. There are more Caesars than are mentioned there, and some of them just reigned for just a little time, and so people say, well, we won't count that one. His reign wasn't long. And then it's hard to know where to begin, because some will say, well, we can begin with Julius Caesar. And others say, well, he never really was officially a Caesar. We'll have to begin with Augustus Caesar. And you see how confusing that becomes? And it's almost as though if this is what I think, I'll go through Revelation and find out and prove what I think about it. And someone says, well, this is what I think, so I'll go through it and show you where it shows what I think about it. And I want to avoid that. But just to mention, those kings, that's often presented as the key to knowing the date of Revelation, and yet it's hard even there to sort that out. So let me just read this to you. And you're going to see, as we read this great evil that the church is facing, and you're going to see it fall. So if you want to take your Bibles, you just may want to follow right along with me. It'll be on the screen, but you may want to see it right out of your own Bible. And I'll be reading from the King James Version. Revelation 17, 1 through 3. And there came one of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come up hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And upon her forehead was the name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. That word admiration could mean astonishment. And the angel said unto me, Wherefore dost thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carried her, which hath the 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was, and is not, and yet is. And here's the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. And there are 7 kings. 5 are fallen, 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are the 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. These shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them. For he is Lord of lords and King of kings. And they that are with him are called, and chosen, and faithful. And he said unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the horse sitteth, are peoples, and multitudes, and nations, and tongues. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. For God hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree, and to give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of God shall be fulfilled. And the woman which thou sawest is that great city, which reigneth over the kings of the earth. And after these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lighted with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and become the habitation of devils, and the hole of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her. And the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. Reward her even as she rewarded you, and double unto her, double according to her works. And the cup which she hath filled to her double. How much she hath glorified herself and lived deliciously, so much torment and sorrow give her. For she saith in her heart, I sit a queen, and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death, and mourning, and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire. For strong is the Lord God who judgeth her. And the kings of the earth who hath committed fornication and lived deliciously with her shall bewail her and lament for her when they shall see the smoke of her burning, standing afar off for fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth their merchandise any more. The merchandise of gold and silver and precious stones and of pearls and fine linen and purple and silk and scarlet and all fine in wood and all manner of vessels of ivory and all manner of vessels of most precious wood and of brass and iron and marble and cinnamon and odors and ointments and frankincense and wine and oil and fine flour and wheat and beast and sheep and horses and chariots and slaves and souls of men. And the fruits that thy soul lusted after are departed from thee. And all things which were dainty and goodly are departed from thee, and thou shalt find them no more at all. The merchants of these things, which were made rich by her, shall stand afar off for fear of her torment, weeping and wailing and saying, Alas, alas, the great city that was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls. For in 1 hour so great riches is come to naught. And every shipmaster and all in company, and all the company in ships, and sailors, and many as trade by the sea, stood afar off, and cried when they saw the smoke of a burning, saying, What city is like unto this great city? And they cast dust on their heads, and cried, weeping and wailing, saying, Alas, alas, that great city, wherein were made rich all that had ships in the sea by reason of her coastlines. For in 1 hour she is made desolate. Rejoice over her, thou heaven, and ye holy apostles and prophets, for God hath avenged you on her. And a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and cast it into the sea, saying, Thus with violence shall that great city Babylon be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all. And the voice of the harpers and musicians and of pipers and trumpeters shall be no more heard at all in thee. And no craftsman of whatever craft he be shall be found any more in thee. And the sound of a millstone shall be heard no more at all in thee. And the light of a candle shall shine no more at all in thee. And the voice of the bridegroom and of the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee. For thy merchants were the great men of the earth. For by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. And there in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints, and all that were slain upon the earth. Okay, do you want to preach that lesson? You see the difficulty I've had here with this text? And yet I think, in spite of all the difficulties there, and like I say, we could go further and further and further into this, and it would be interesting, but it wouldn't necessarily be biblical, just to tell you the truth to do it. But don't miss the spiritual lesson here, and it has application even unto this day. All the things of this world, all the costly, the gold, the glory of it, the scarlet, the beauties of the material things of this world, what's that worth? When the day of judgment comes, what are they? They're not going to help you. And look what this city had done to obtain those things. All the wickedness and all the cheating and all the corruption that it had done to obtain all these worldly things. Now what? You see, there comes a time of judgment for all that, and we've got to realize the true value of things in this world are not worldly things. And those who compromise spiritually to make gain worldly are making the wrong bargain, aren't they? And then this great fall, that accountability that is sure to come. I tell you where the city, whatever this city is, I'll tell you where the city made the great mistake. It tried to make war with the Lamb. Remember the Lamb that was slain and was standing by the throne of God? And all who try to make war with God and make war with His church are bound for defeat. Now, they may look like great beasts, like the dragon and the prophet that come out of the sea, and be very intimidating. They might look like this false prophet and like this sorceress here, that they may use that power and can be very deceiving. And they might be like this great whore and be very seductive. Here's what we need to do. We need to stay faithful to the Lamb. Let me go back to a passage in this, and I'll turn this then to the invitation to show you that even though there's a lot we don't know about this, here's something we can know. That them which make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them. He is Lord of lords and King of kings. And notice this, and they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. You see, that's where we want to be. We want to be with the Lamb. And we're called. We're called by the gospel. And that gospel call goes out into all the world, to every man. And we're chosen because God chooses those who hear and believe and obey the gospel of Jesus Christ. And having turned from our sins and confessed his name before men, and having been baptized into Christ, chosen, well, then we need to stay faithful, don't we? Called and chosen and faithful. Well, we don't face the same trials that the Christians faced in those 7 churches of Asia that they're warned about in this book. But I tell you, the devil, he still tries to intimidate. He still tries to deceive. He still tries to entice. But we can overcome it all if we're with the Lamb. And we need to be among the called and the chosen and the faithful. And so with that, I'm going to extend the invitation that you respond to that gospel call. You let God choose you, and you be with the Lamb, and then you be faithful to him all the days of your life. And that invitation is out as we stand and sing this song.